Tua Tagovailoa might have played his last snap this season. All that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. So it's college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about Tua Tagovailoa going down with a hip injury, adding to these things for which, well, is going to have playoff implications, if not just what's going to happen with Tua the rest of the season. And I want to talk about this at some length as Alabama is up 35-7 at the half at the time of this upload. But first, I want to encourage you, sign up for my newsletter. And if you do so between now and December 7th, you are entered to win the Hertz lamp, which, well, you've seen it, but it looks like that. And over 1,000 people have already signed up just this week, and I've heard good things about the stuff that I've been writing about, which is not as OU related as you think. It's college football, it's sports, and I love to write, and I like to think that I'm good at it, and I'm hearing that I am. I think that this is going to really just piss Alabama fans off, and I don't mean me saying that Tua Tagovailoa might have played his last snap, which is on the table, because this is a guy who would have been, or is probably going to be, if not number one, the number 2 overall pick in the 2020 draft, depending on how a team feels about Chase Young and whether or not that team is the Cincinnati Bengals or the Miami Dolphins, because those feel like the two teams that have the best opportunity to go 1-2 in the draft. And, well, Miami would probably draft Tua, and yes, Cincinnati has its quarterback of the future in Ryan Finley, but you might think that maybe they want to go get Tua and cut bait with Andy Dalton and try to rebuild their defense with Chase Young, which leads me to, first, why the hell was Tua Tagovailoa still in the game with 3:15 left to go, up 35-7 at Mississippi State? Well, as Nick Saban said during the halftime with Molly McGrath, where they do the coach walk-off, said, look, we wanted to leave him in there to get him the extra practice during 2-minute drill. We were going to go with Mac Jones just as soon as that was over. And he said, I don't ever worry about players getting hurt. Certainly don't want to get Tua hurt. But no, nobody wanted to see that. And what is really off-putting about this isn't that Nick Saban left him in the game, although I probably am, along with Alabama fans, going, I don't give a good doggone about 2-minute drill. Run 2-minute drill during practice. You know, actual practice, like during the week. Don't do that in a live game situation where you have defensive ends and defensive tackles that are just aching to T-fy on one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. I also think this is interesting because, well, do you really consider Alabama a top 5 team without Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback, to say nothing of Raekwon Davis going down to end the half? Now, this is an Alabama team that at one time or another started 7 true freshmen as starters, right? And on that defensive line, Raekwon Davis was the only dude that I absolutely positively trusted. I think DJ Dale and Justin Igbo are going to be some dudes. But you also got puppies behind them. And while Terrell Lewis is awesome, he can only do so much in that front 7. And I get that the back end is your strength when you're talking about the Alabama defense. But the strength of Alabama is Tua Tagovailoa and that wide receiving group. And I think the two go hand in hand because wide receiver is the dependent position, which means that you got to have a quarterback who's good enough to distribute the ball to playmakers, and building around Mac Jones is not the same as building around Tua Tagovailoa, for which we've had folks like respected Elite 11 guy and Super Bowl winning quarterback Trent Dilfer say, I think he's the best that I've ever seen. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, I think that Tua is certainly in the conversation, and I love watching him play football as much as anybody else. And he's an outstanding dude, and I usually root for outstanding dudes. This is a man who is very in touch with his faith. He's very in touch with his family. His family moved to Alabama to help take care of him. His brother played his last couple of years of high school football in Alabama, and he is the heir apparent to the position, the third-string quarterback. Probably going to see more of Tallulah than you have seen in recent weeks because, well, if Mac Jones is engineering blowouts, then you know what it is. But also you have Auburn, who is left, and I get that at the time of this upload, Auburn is about to face a Georgia team for which they're in the ball game. They should be able to play with Georgia despite Bo Nix. And Bo Nix, by the way, hasn't thrown any of his picks at home, and they're playing at Jordan Hare. He's actually been really good at Jordan Hare. It's on the road where he's kind of sucked, which is what I'm getting at with the Iron Bowl. Like, if you got to go with Mac Jones in the Iron Bowl, You don't really feel great about that as an Alabama fan. You don't feel like you're going to lose, but you don't feel good. And Auburn fans got to feel like they're licking their chops because they know they got Derek Brown and Big Cat Bryant over there who are just aching to nail an Alabama quarterback. So along with all of that, I'm also wondering, what does this mean for the selection process? Do the Alabama wins mean that much more if there's no Tua Tagovailoa for Auburn? And how good or bad is it for Alabama, who still is very much in the college football playoff race, if something should happen to LSU, Georgia, or even Ohio State or Clemson at this point, to say nothing of the one-loss teams behind them like Oklahoma or undefeated teams like Minnesota and Baylor at the time of this upload, all right? I'm saying that this has wide-ranging implications for everybody involved, but first, how bad is the injury to Tua? And we probably won't have an answer to that until the following day or even Monday, which is the reason that I'm doing this now, because I feel like we need to get this conversation going about what does it mean if he has to miss the Auburn game, let alone the rest of the season. Would he be the kind of person that would do the smart thing, which is protect your business interests, right? Because we're talking about a guy who has had 2 tightrope surgeries, one on each ankle, and depending on what is going on with this hip injury, you don't really want to draft a guy that is perhaps damaged goods at the next level, or you want to draft a guy who's been taking care of himself. How much of this is going to have to be rehab? We've already seen this guy miss, again, Arkansas, which is essentially a middle school team, but he missed the game. And whether or not he's invited to the Heisman ceremony was largely dependent on how he finished this season. I think most people would agree that it's Joe Burrow's trophy to lose at this point, with guys like Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts perhaps getting invites along with guys like Chase Young and even Chuba Hubbard at Oklahoma State. But now, if he doesn't finish the season as a Heisman voter, do you really vote for this guy in any capacity? Do you rate him 1, 2, 3? I don't think you do. In the same way that you would have the same thing to ask about Chase Young had he missed more than, well, the 2 games that he's going to miss, which was Rutgers this week and then Maryland last week. So some interesting conversations about also first-team All-America. Those matter because it's huge for a college football program to claim All-Americas, especially unanimous and or consensus All-Americans like Tua Tagovailoa had an opportunity to be. I think all of this is in play, and I'm really interested to see what we do with this information, let alone what Alabama does, because I think that there's going to be 2 groups of Alabama fans. They're going to be the ones that want to see him come back and are also saying, hey, look, if he's good enough to go, Tua at 70% is better than Mac Jones at 100%. And if you're still in it to play for a college football playoff berth and you can do what you did in 2017, do it. But this isn't that team. Alabama has been just riddled with the injury bug all year long. We're talking about losing Dylan Moses to start the season. We're talking about trying to play Shane Lee and Christian Harris at the mic. We're talking about losing guys into the portal like Tony Alfano, who was the best recruit in that 2019 class. And if you lose even one of those wideouts, are you that good? Not as compared to the Charlie's Angels triplets that are over at LSU or even the ones that play at Oklahoma. These are all things for which it seems like it's just mounting on Alabama this year. So that team that was in 2017 that made it into the playoff and ended up winning a national championship, that ain't this team. I just want to be clear about that. And Alabama fans would know this in their hearts of hearts. You're not as talented as you're going to be next year or the year after, even with Tua. But Tua is the reason for which we can still think of Alabama as making it into this Final Four and making a run. Without Tua Tagovailoa, this Alabama team is a top 10 team. It's not that good. It's not good enough to compete for a college football playoff spot and win. We're talking about, could this Alabama team beat Clemson? Could it beat Ohio State? Could it beat Georgia? Couldn't beat LSU. We already know that. It was a 5-point game at the end. But we all saw LSU beat Alabama like they stole something in Tuscaloosa. They mounted a comeback, and I get it, right? You got the big slant from Devontae Smith on my favorite true freshman, Derek Stingley, and that brought you back into the game. And you had some egregious turnovers, one of which by Tua Tagovailoa, where he just put the ball on the ground without any pressure to start the game. But all that aside, you had an opportunity to show everybody that you were good enough to play with these top 4 teams with getting a win against LSU. You just couldn't do it. So that's where we are with Alabama. I sincerely hope that Tua is able to go. Maybe by the time this upload is even finished, he's able to go back out and play. I doubt it. And I doubt that you would want him to. Because I think what we're going to really focus on is Nick Saban doing the right thing by playing Tua Tagovailoa up 28. Even if you want to get him some extra work, I don't know that you would have pulled him, but now we're understanding why guys like Justin Fields don't finish games. You know, we're saying this guy can't win the Heisman Trophy because he doesn't finish the game. Well, how many games does he have to play? What is the threshold for being a Heisman winner? What is the threshold for being an All-American? What is the threshold for being considered one of the best to do it? I mean, we have minimum attempts for like passer rating. We have minimum attempts for like the Davey O'Brien award that they consider. How many times did you get thrown on is one of the things that we'll talk about when we meet at the Jim Thorpe Award Selection Committee to try to whittle this down to 3. These are all things that matter, and there's no real rubric or criterion. But I think that all this criteria, but I think all of this has to come into play. And I think if you think that Tua Tagovailoa is one of the best players in college football based on what he's done this year, and you vote for him in the Heisman, you have a Heisman vote, I'm really not going to come after you for that because I think you'd be right ultimately. But these are all things to consider. And if you think that a guy has to play so many games to be considered for this award, you're probably going to leave Tua Tagovailoa off of the Heisman list this year. And this is after the year that he had last year, which is one in which any other year he wins the Heisman Trophy. And had he finished out the SEC championship game, he probably wins that trophy, probably doesn't go to Kyler Murray, in all honesty. Difference is Kyler Murray played a hell of a game against the Texas team that beat them earlier in that year to win a Big 12 title, and Jalen Hurts had to come off the bench to secure an SEC championship for Alabama, and we know that most voters are going to take into account that Tua didn't finish that game, and that's why he ended up second in the Heisman voting, and I think that is going to play into how people view Tua Tagovailoa's injury this year. He's gone from a guy who is a gamer to a guy that just might be injury-prone. Either way, still one of the greatest quarterbacks that I've ever seen play the game at college or any level, and I sincerely hope that the lefty heals up and gets the opportunity to decide what he's going to do from a healthy position as opposed to being 70, 60, 80%. All right, that is it for me. Doses.